Why was her name missing from the list? The paper had passed across the table, from one gloved hand to another, a whisper of authority in a room thick with stale coffee and silence. The names were read aloud, one by one. Each man lifted his chin as his was called. Boots shifted on the cold concrete floor, nervous breath misting in the dawn air. They were chosen, acknowledged, recorded into the story of what was about to unfold. But when the roll call ended, she was still standing. No one had spoken her name. No one even looked in her direction. It wasn't new to her. She had been left out before. In training, on rosters, in conversations where her silence was assumed to be consent. She was a shadow in a place that believed shadows had no voice. Yet tonight, this night of brittle stars and wind clawing through hangar doors, something inside her refused to bend. The mission was too important, the stakes too real. She tightened her jaw, eyes resting on the map strewn across the steel table. A kill zone outlined in red, an extraction path traced in blue, small circles, black as ink wells, marking danger they already expected. And then one unmarked spot, the one no one wanted to talk about. She noticed it immediately, and she noticed how quickly the briefing officer's hand had covered it, like a parent hiding a wound. But she saw, and she remembered. No one in the room asked her thoughts. No one cared that she had spent weeks running simulations, poring over intelligence fragments, memorizing the ridgelines, the choke points, the weather reports. She knew this ground like she knew the scars across her own palms. And yet in the silence that followed the commander's last words, dismissed, step off in 1 hour, she was invisible. She walked out with the others, boots striking the floor in unison, shoulders brushing past her without a glance, jokes muttered between men trying to mask fear with bravado, and her, in the middle of it, the one no one mentioned, the one whose name had been overlooked. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. Outside, the air cut sharper than a blade. The base lights flickered against a pale sky, the first hint of dawn teasing the horizon. She pulled her cap lower, pressing fabric against her ears, listening to the metallic groan of transport trucks warming in the cold. Diesel fumes stung her nose. Somewhere far away, a dog barked into the emptiness. She adjusted her pack, the straps digging into her shoulders. Her rifle rested against her spine, familiar weight pressing steady against her. To her right, two men laughed about something crude, their voices too loud for the hour. To her left, one soldier rubbed his hands together, whispering a prayer so soft it vanished into the wind. She caught fragments of all of it. She always did. She had learned to listen to the sounds between sounds, the tremor in a voice, the pause too long to be casual, the silence that revealed more than words ever could. It had kept her alive before, and it would keep her alive again. The convoy rolled out slow, engines growling like restless animals. Dust swirled in their wake as they cut through the valley. The landscape stretched, barren and raw, mountains etched black against the rising sun. Inside the vehicle, she sat pressed between steel and silence. The others talked, low and urgent. She didn't join them. Her thoughts weren't here. They were back home. Back to the kitchen table where her mother's hands once moved gently across flour, shaping bread in silence. Back to the sound of her brother's laughter, high-pitched and full of mischief, before the war had swallowed him whole. Back to the letter that came 3 winters ago, creased, smudged, final. That letter was why she was here, why she had volunteered for missions others avoided, why her eyes never looked away when maps revealed blind corners and unspoken dangers. Because somewhere out there, in the hills they were heading toward, had been the last place her brother's unit was seen. No one cared to connect those dots, but she had. And it burned inside her like fire under ice. The truck jolted hard, throwing her shoulder against cold steel. A curse broke the monotony. Tires ground against gravel. For a moment the laughter stopped, and all that remained was the hollow thud of hearts pressed too tight. She breathed in slow, out slower. Her hands tightened over her knees. She wondered if the others could hear it, the silence of fear, the way it grew louder than gunfire when men realized what they had signed up for. Some buried it with jokes, others with prayers, and some, like her, carried it in silence, letting it cut them open from the inside because wounds you carried without showing were harder to heal. The commander's voice broke through the radio, a static-laced growl of coordinates and warnings. She traced them in her mind, overlaying them on the map she had memorized. Every word confirmed what she already knew. This mission would not unfold as cleanly as promised. She wanted to speak, to point out the trap hidden in the terrain, the valley that narrowed like a throat waiting to choke, the high ridges perfect for unseen fire. But she said nothing, because her voice, she had learned, was often met with silence. And silence, she thought, could sometimes kill. The truck stopped. Dust settled around them in thick clouds. The men jumped down, adjusting gear, checking weapons, breathing faster than they wanted to admit. She followed, boots sinking into loose soil, hands steadying her pack. She scanned the horizon, flat light, shadows stretching across jagged stone. Nothing moved, yet everything felt alive. Her eyes caught on a ridgeline to the east, a flicker, too small for most to notice, but not for her. Someone was already there. She felt it in her gut before her mind confirmed it. But she kept walking, one step then another. The team moved forward unaware. The commander barked orders. Formation shifted. Rifles pointed outward, scanning emptiness that wasn't empty at all. And she, quiet, invisible, carried the weight of what she knew. That night she couldn't sleep. The campfire burned low, smoke curling into the stars. Men spoke in low tones, trading fears like currency. One confessed he had a daughter waiting at home, too young to remember him. Another admitted he hated the silence after firefights, when only the wounded made sound. She listened, she always listened. Her own words stayed locked inside, but her thoughts circled, relentless. Why hadn't she spoken up? Why had she swallowed the warning she carried in her chest? Because she was tired of being dismissed. Because she was afraid her truth would be ignored, and that ignoring would somehow hurt more than failure itself. She closed her eyes. Her brother's face rose from memory, mud-smeared, laughing even when the world seemed hopeless. And with that memory came a decision. Tomorrow she would not stay silent, even if they still refused to hear her name. But the dawn brought more than light. It brought gunfire. The sound cracked across the valley before breakfast, before coffee could be poured, before prayers could be finished. Men scrambled for cover, dirt flying, metal clanging. The commander's voice roared orders no one could process fast enough. She dropped low, rifle in hand, eyes locked on the ridgeline, where she had seen the flicker, where no one had listened. And now men were falling. Her pulse slammed in her ears. Dust stung her eyes. She pressed cheek to cold metal, breathing slow through chaos. And in that chaos, she felt something shift. She was no longer invisible, because survival itself now depended on whether they finally saw her, and whether she could carry them through the storm that had already begun. She didn't remember raising the rifle. One second the valley cracked open with fire. The next she was already sighting down the barrel, eyes narrowing against the dust. It wasn't instinct. Instinct was blind. This was something sharper, memory, repetition, 1,000 hours of practice colliding with the single second that mattered. Her finger pressed, recoil slamming into her shoulder. A shadow on the ridge folded backward, tumbling into stone. Another shot rang from her left, not hers, and someone else dropped. The battlefield bloomed with chaos. Men shouted, stumbling for cover, voices raw and panicked. The commander barked orders, words drowned in static and fear. Dirt sprayed where rounds punched into the earth. Boots slipped. Hands fumbled. And still no one called her name. She moved anyway. Sliding behind a broken slab of rock, she pressed cheek to scope, eyes searching. Shapes flickered, enemy silhouettes crouching where the sun lit the ridge. They had the high ground, perfect line of sight. The trap she had warned herself about, the silence she had swallowed, had already opened its jaws. A round cracked near her ear. Stone splintered, biting into her skin. She ignored the sting, breath steady. Another squeeze of the trigger. Another figure dropped. No one saw her, not yet. But they would feel her. She scanned, adjusted, scanned again. The battlefield became sound and shadow. Gunfire, a staccato rhythm. Shouts tearing through air. The metallic clink of shells hitting ground. And beneath it all, the silence of those who wouldn't speak again. Her chest tightened. She pushed it down, focused. Her brother's voice echoed in her memory. One shot is survival, 2 shots is belief. The third, that's for them to remember you by. She fired her third. The ridge screamed with return fire. Dust swallowed her vision. Her ears rang. Somewhere behind, a man cried out, a sound too human to ignore. She twisted, spotting him. A soldier clutching his leg, blood spreading fast across the dirt. His rifle lay inches away, useless. His eyes met hers, pleading. Her body moved before thought could. She sprinted low, round spitting earth around her. Slid beside him, grip locking under his arm. He gasped, cursed, tried to push her away. "Stay down," she hissed. Her voice was sharp, commanding. For the first time, it wasn't silence. And for the first time, someone listened. She dragged him toward cover, muscles burning. Another shot cracked overhead. The soldier groaned, teeth clenched, but she didn't stop. Not until they were behind the slab, safe enough for one more breath. Only then did she glance back. And she caught it. The commander's eyes. Watching her. Not disbelief, not annoyance, something else. Recognition. The firefight dragged. Minutes stretched thin, each one heavy with survival. Men fired blind, shouting to mask fear. The ridge still spat fury. Every time silence fell, another burst tore it apart again. She reloaded, fingers quick, breath slow. Her hands shook only once, when she thought of her brother and how his last fight might have sounded like this. When the lull came, brief as it was, the commander leaned toward her. Dust streaked across his face. His voice was low, urgent. "You saw this coming, didn't you?" Her stomach twisted. She said nothing. His jaw clenched. A pause, then, "What else aren't we seeing?" There it was, the question she had carried in her chest for days, the question no one had ever asked her. Her throat was dry, her tongue heavy, but she answered. "The ridge isn't just a perch, it's a funnel. They want us pinned here, the pass to the north." She stopped, swallowing. "That's the only way out, but it's narrow, and they'll know we'll take it." The commander's eyes sharpened, calculating. "You're saying they want us to run?" She nodded. He cursed under his breath, gaze shifting back to the ridge. And in that moment, something changed. For the first time, he wasn't just looking at her. He was seeing her. The next hours blurred. They fought, shifted, bled, men fell. The sun climbed higher, mocking them with heat. Water ran low, ammo lower. And through it all, she was everywhere, spotting movements others missed, pointing out shadows before they became bullets, dragging another wounded soldier to safety. Still, no one said her name, but they followed her gestures, leaned on her warnings, glanced her way when silence grew too heavy. Invisible becoming undeniable. Piece by piece. When night finally bled into the valley, firelight danced across hollow faces. The survivors sat in tight clusters, eating rations without taste, eyes darting at every sound. She sat apart, rifle across her knees, staring at the dark ridgeline. One soldier broke the silence, a young one. His voice cracked when he spoke. "You ever think they'll forget us, even if we don't make it back?" No one answered. The fire popped. She closed her eyes, hearing her brother again. Not his laughter this time, his silence. The the silence of absence heavier than any bullet. She whispered, almost too soft to hear. "They'll forget the names, but they'll remember the stand." The young soldier looked at her. His lips parted like he wanted to ask more, but he didn't. He only nodded. And for the first time, she saw it in someone else's eyes. Belief. Later that night, when most had drifted into restless sleep, she sat awake, staring at the stars. The commander approached. His steps were careful, not out of stealth but respect. He lowered himself beside her, slow, deliberate. For a long while he said nothing. Then quietly, "Your brother, he was here, wasn't he?" Her chest froze. She turned, eyes sharp. "How do you know?" "I don't," he admitted, "but I can see it, in the way you move, in the way you look at this place. You're not just here for the mission." The words cracked something in her. She wanted to speak, to pour out the story she had locked away, the letter, the silence, the unanswered questions. But she didn't, not yet. Instead, she whispered, "I can't let this ground take anyone else." The commander's eyes softened. He didn't argue, didn't pry, just nodded, a man recognizing something sacred. And in that silence, she felt less alone than she had in years. Dawn returned with smoke on the horizon. The enemy wasn't done. The valley once again began to stir. The men prepared slower now, wearier. Fear clung heavier to their shoulders. She rose with them, adjusted her rifle, checked her pack, eyes steady on the ridgeline. She wasn't waiting for permission anymore. Because whether they said her name or not, she had already chosen. She would stand, even if the world kept pretending not to see. The valley looked different at night. Shadows lengthened, swallowing shapes whole. The ridges blurred into jagged teeth against a star-pinned sky. Every sound carried farther, the scrape of boots on rock, the metallic click of a safety, the dry cough of a soldier trying not to be heard. They moved in silence. Orders were whispered, gestures replacing words. Each man carried the weight of the day's ambush on his back. Some limped. Some pressed hands to bandaged wounds. All of them carried the hollowed look of those who had seen how quickly the world could end. And she walked among them. Not leading, not officially, but every so often eyes flicked her way, waiting, watching, quietly checking what she saw before deciding what they themselves believed. The shift was subtle, but it was there. No one said her name, but no one ignored her anymore. They reached a choke point just before midnight, a narrow defile carved by water long gone. The commander called a halt, raising a clenched fist. Boots stilled. The men dropped into crouches, rifles angled outward. She scanned the ridge, dark, too dark. Something in her gut coiled. The commander turned to her, voice low. "Well." It caught her off guard, the weight of being asked. Her throat tightened. She glanced once more at the ridgeline, saw what the others couldn't or wouldn't. A patch of black darker than the rest, a shadow that seemed too still, too intentional. "They're there," she whispered. The commander didn't question. He signaled the squad. Movements shifted. Positions tightened. They braced for what they now knew was inevitable. Minutes stretched, nothing, only wind curling through stone. One soldier muttered, "She's wrong." Then, the first shot cracked. A scream followed. The ridge erupted in muzzle flashes. She pressed flat, breath hard, heart steady. Her eyes traced arcs of light marking positions. She counted. 1, 2, 3, too many. Her hands trembled, not from fear but memory. Because she had seen this before. In her brother's last letter, smudged with dirt and sweat, he had written about a place just like this. A place where the world funneled men into a grave and left silence to bury them. He hadn't named it, but she felt it. The same ridges, the same trap. And maybe the same enemy. The thought seared her chest. She adjusted scope, fired, one down, another. Her breath slowed, matching the rhythm of recoil. But for every shadow that fell, two more appeared. The squad fought hard. Shouts mingled with static. Grenades cracked stone into fragments. The air filled with dust and grit, choking lungs. And through it all she kept firing. Not for glory, not even for survival. For memory. For her brother. When the firefight broke, it wasn't victory. It was survival. Bodies littered the defile, both theirs and the enemy. Smoke drifted upward, trailing toward the indifferent stars. The silence that followed was broken only by ragged breath, the soft moans of the wounded, the shuffle of boots searching for what was left. She sat against stone, rifle across her lap. Her hands were raw, her face streaked with dirt and blood that wasn't hers. The commander crouched beside her. "You kept us alive." She shook her head, not all. His jaw tightened. He didn't argue. Instead, he handed her a canteen. She drank slow, water tasting of metal and ash. For a moment, they sat in silence. Then he asked, "What was it you saw before anyone else?" Her eyes dropped. She hesitated. Then quietly, "The shadow, too still, too controlled. I've seen it before." "In training." She shook her head. "In a letter." The commander frowned, but he didn't press, not yet. Later, when the squad regrouped, a young soldier sat across from her, cradling his rifle. His face was pale, smeared with soot. His eyes wouldn't meet anyone's. She watched him, saw the tremor in his hands, the shallow breaths, the guilt unspoken. "You froze," she said softly. His eyes snapped up, wide, ashamed. He started, then stopped. His throat bobbed. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "It happens to everyone once." He blinked, confusion breaking through shame. "You think you're the only one?" she asked. He swallowed hard. "My brother," she whispered. First time he saw fire, he froze so long he couldn't forgive himself. Thought he'd failed. Thought he wasn't made for it. But the truth was, she paused, breath shaking. The truth was he was human, and the ones who act like they don't freeze, they're lying. The soldier's eyes glistened. He nodded just once. And she saw it. His shoulders loosened, if only slightly. A breath released he didn't know he was holding. He would carry this night forever, but maybe not as a curse. Maybe as proof he had survived. The march resumed at dawn. Exhaustion clung to them heavier than their packs. They moved slower now, each step deliberate, each glance sharper. No one trusted silence anymore. She walked with her eyes fixed on the horizon. The mountains rose higher, cruel and endless. Somewhere beyond them lay their extraction point. But also, somewhere in them, lay the last place her brother's unit had been seen. She hadn't told anyone, not yet. Because she didn't know if they'd understand. This mission wasn't just duty to her. It was unfinished blood, a wound left open too long. And the closer they got, the more she felt it throb. By midday, clouds rolled in. The sky darkened. Wind tore through the valley, carrying the scent of rain and earth. Thunder rumbled far off. They found a ruined village, a scattering of stone huts long abandoned. The commander ordered a halt. They needed shelter, rest, time to regroup. The men moved in, weapons raised, eyes scanning for signs of life. But the only life left was dust. Inside one of the huts, she sat against a wall, knees pulled close. She ran her fingers over the crumbling stone, imagining the families that once filled this place. Children laughing, fires burning, bread baking. War had erased all of it. The commander entered, settling across from her. For a long while he said nothing. The storm outside filled the silence, rain striking broken roofs. Finally he asked, "The letter, what did it say?" Her chest tightened. She wanted to guard it, to keep it hers. But his voice wasn't demanding, it was human. She closed her eyes. He wrote about fear, about how the silence after gunfire was worse than the gunfire itself, about how he felt the world forgetting them while they were still breathing. Her voice cracked. And he wrote about a place, a valley, traps in the ridges. He said if anything happened, it would be there. Her hands trembled. She clenched them into fists. I think this is it. The commander's face hardened. He didn't argue, didn't dismiss. He only nodded. And in that nod, she felt something shift again. For the first time since she had arrived, she wasn't carrying her brother's ghost alone. That night sleep didn't come. The storm passed, but the silence it left was heavier. The men drifted into uneasy rest. She stayed awake, staring into the dark. Every creak of the ruined huts, every whisper of wind, every memory clawing back. Her brother's voice again, laughing, calling her name. The last thing she heard before he left. And then the silence after. The silence she had been fighting ever since. Her fists clenched tighter, her chest burned. Tomorrow, she thought, tomorrow they would reach the place. And tomorrow, she would find out if the silence had a face. The morning broke with silence that didn't feel like peace. No gunfire, no voices, just the kind of stillness that pressed against the skin, heavy, waiting. The squad rose from their makeshift shelters slowly, eyes darting, movements stiff. The rain had washed the dust into streaks across their uniforms, leaving them looking older, worn, already half buried by the land itself. She stepped out into the light. The village ruins stood around her like gravestones, broken walls, collapsed roofs, windows gaping like hollow eyes. She felt the weight of all the lives erased here, echoing her brother's words. Silence after gunfire is worse than the gunfire itself. She pulled her pack tighter, adjusted her rifle. The road ahead cut into the mountains, narrowing with every step. Somewhere in that stone throat lay the place her brother had warned about, the place she had carried with her every mile of this journey. And now they were walking straight into it. The commander gave the signal and the squad began to move. Their boots scraped against wet stone, the sound too loud in the valley's emptiness. Every few steps, someone glanced at the ridges. Every few steps, she felt her pulse in her throat. The young soldier she'd spoken to the night before walked close to her now. His eyes were steadier but not clear. He carried the look of someone still haunted. She recognized it. She carried it too. "Do you think," he whispered, voice cracking, "anyone will remember this, us, what we're doing?" She didn't answer right away. The truth was heavy, too heavy for someone so young. But finally she whispered back, "History doesn't remember names, it remembers moments. What we do in them, that's what survives." He swallowed hard, nodding as though the words were both comfort and burden. And in his eyes she saw the same question she had asked herself 1,000 times. Would this be their moment, or their grave? By midday the path narrowed again. Cliffs rose high on both sides, jagged and sharp. The air was colder here, shadows lingering even as the sun climbed overhead. She slowed, every sense in her screamed. This was it. The place her brother had described, the valley where silence swallowed men. Her chest tightened. She looked up at the ridges, every shadow a potential rifle barrel, every rock an enemy waiting. The commander noticed her hesitation. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This is the place, isn't it?" She nodded once. His jaw tightened. He studied the cliffs, then the men, then her. "Options?" he asked. The word caught her again. Options, as if she had the authority, as if her voice mattered. She scanned the terrain, saw what was hidden, saw what could happen. "They're waiting for us to walk through. Straight line. Nowhere to run. It's what my brother described. If we go in blind, we won't come out." The commander's brow furrowed. "So what do you suggest?" She drew a breath. "We split. One team draws attention down the pass, the other climbs, takes the ridge from the side." His eyes narrowed. "Climb with the wounded." "It's the only chance," she said. "They expect us to be predictable. If we're not, we have a sliver. Otherwise." She let the silence finish for her. The commander studied her. The silence stretched. Finally, he nodded. And in that nod, she felt the weight shift again. The decision was brutal: 2 groups, one bait, one strike. Men argued, some resisted, but the commander's word stood, and this time his word echoed hers. She volunteered for the climb. She didn't hesitate. The young soldier followed her. His jaw was tight, but he didn't back down. "If you're going," he said, "so am I." For a moment she almost told him no, that he was too young, too unsteady, that his fear would betray him. But then she remembered her brother, young once too, fearful once too. She only nodded, and together they prepared. The climb was worse than she expected. The stone was slick from rain, hands slipping against jagged edges. Packs dragged them back. Muscles screamed. Every move upward felt like lifting the weight of the dead pressing down below. She led steady and deliberate, breath measured, eyes scanning every crevice. Behind her, the young soldier struggled but refused to quit. His breath came harsh, ragged. Once he slipped, rocks clattering down into the void. Her hand shot back, gripping his wrist before he fell. For a second their eyes locked, his wide with panic, hers sharp with command. "Breathe," she whispered. He did, and he climbed again. By dusk they reached the ridge. Their hands bled, their legs shook, but they were there. And so were the enemy. She froze, heart slamming. Shadows moved ahead, figures crouched, rifles poised, waiting for the ambush to unfold. Her chest burned, rage and grief twisted together. These were the men her brother had warned about. Maybe the very same. Her hands tightened around the rifle. For a moment the world narrowed to the sight in her scope. She saw their faces, not distant shadows anymore, real, flesh, alive. Her brother's killers. She could end them now. Her finger hovered on the trigger. But then she heard it, the sound of boots below, her squad moving into the pass, unaware. She closed her eyes. This wasn't just vengeance, this was survival. For them, for the ones who still lived. She exhaled, a long, steady breath, and fired. The ridge exploded into chaos. Gunfire lit the rocks, shadows scattering. Men shouted, scrambling for cover. She and the young soldier opened fire, cutting down silhouettes before they could fire into the pass. Below, the squad reacted. The ambush was broken, surprise stolen. The enemy faltered, torn between firing down and defending their flank. The battle stretched into madness. Stone cracked, sparks flew, dust and smoke blurred everything. But through it all she moved like memory itself, precise, relentless, every shot a choice, every breath a promise. Her brother's voice echoed with each pull of the trigger. And when silence finally fell again, it was her breath that filled it. Not theirs. The ridge was theirs. Bodies lay sprawled across the stone, rifles abandoned. The squad below emerged from the pass, shaken but alive. The commander climbed to meet her. His face was streaked with dirt, eyes dark with exhaustion. But when he looked at her, there was something new. Respect. Not just for her aim. For her choice. "You saved us," he said. She shook her head. Her throat was tight. "I couldn't save him," she whispered. The commander frowned. She met his eyes. "My brother, this was where they were lost. I couldn't save him, but I wasn't going to let it take anyone else." Silence stretched between them, heavy, real. Finally, the commander placed a hand on her shoulder, firm, grounding. "History doesn't always say the names," he said quietly, "but it remembers the ones who refuse to fall." Her chest ached, and for the first time in years, the silence inside her shifted. Not gone, but lighter. Night fell over the ridge. The squad made camp among the rocks, firelight flickering against tired faces. The young soldier sat near her, quiet. His hands still shook faintly, but his eyes were different now, stronger. Was that the place?" he asked. She nodded. His lips parted, words forming and dying before they could leave. Finally, he just whispered, "I'm sorry." She looked at him, confused. "For your brother," he said. Her throat tightened. She swallowed hard. "Don't be," she whispered. He stood, now so did we. The young soldier nodded, eyes glistening. And she turned her gaze back to the dark horizon. The war wasn't over, the mission wasn't finished. But something inside her had changed. For the first time, she wasn't carrying his ghost alone. She was carrying his stand. The ridge still smelled of smoke. Even after the fires died, even after the last rifle had gone silent, the stench lingered. Burnt powder, blood drying on stone, the kind of smell that followed men home in their dreams and clung to their skin like a second uniform. She sat apart from the others that night, the firelight painting her face in uneven lines. The flames crackled, but they didn't warm her. Not really. Her eyes stayed fixed on the dark, the mountains stretching beyond. Always beyond. The squad murmured behind her. Some whispered about luck, others about skill. None said her name out loud, but every word carried the weight of her choice, the choice that had saved them. Still, the silence between her breaths told her what no one else dared. The war wasn't finished with them. The ridge was only a reprieve, not deliverance. At dawn, the commander gathered them. His face was harder now, jaw clenched, eyes sunken. He spoke with the tone of a man who'd left something of himself back in that valley, but had no time to grieve. "We move again," he said simply. Groans rippled through the men. Their bodies ached, their spirits more so. But no one argued, not here, not now. She stood too, wordless, adjusted her pack, tightened the strap of her rifle. The motions came easy, as if her body had memorized them long before her mind could. The young soldier watched her. His eyes, once frantic, now held something else, an anchor fragile but real. "Do you ever get used to it?" he asked quietly as they prepared. Her hands stilled on her rifle strap. She didn't answer at first, didn't want to, but his gaze held her, needing something, anything. "You don't get used to it," she finally said. "You just stop being surprised." He swallowed hard, as if the words were heavier than he'd expected. And then the march began again. The road wound higher into the mountains. Every step seemed to take them further from the world they knew. Trees thinned, giving way to jagged cliffs and barren stretches where even birds refused to fly. Food ran low, water too. Their packs grew lighter, but not from relief, only from loss. By the second night, hunger gnawed louder than the silence. Some of the men snapped at each other, anger flaring in short, desperate bursts. One accused another of taking more than his share. Another cursed the commander under his breath. And through it all she stayed quiet. Until the commander's voice cut the tension. "Enough," he growled. His tone carried steel, but his eyes betrayed something else. He was running thin, too. It was then that the men began to look at her. Not directly, but in fragments. A glance when they thought she wasn't watching. A shift of attention in the firelight. They'd begun to weigh her presence. To wonder if the ridge was luck, or if something more had taken root in her. She felt their stares like stone against her back. But she said nothing. On the third day, they found the remnants of another squad. The bodies lay scattered across the rocks, uniforms torn, rifles abandoned. Crows circled overhead, black wings cutting against the gray sky. The men froze. Their boots wouldn't carry them forward. She stepped ahead alone. Her breath caught in her throat as she crouched by the first fallen body. The soldier's eyes were still open, glassy, fixed on nothing. She closed them gently with her fingertips. Behind her, someone muttered a prayer. Another turned away, retching. The commander's voice was tight when he spoke. "Strip the supplies. We can't leave with nothing." The men hesitated. Some refused outright. It was she who moved first. Not because she wanted to, but because she understood. The living had to survive, even if it meant taking from the dead. Her hands shook as she unclasped a pack from a lifeless shoulder. She didn't look at his face. Couldn't. And when the others saw her do it, One by one they followed. By dusk they carried food again, water, ammunition. But the silence was heavier than before. That night the young soldier sat beside her. His hands were raw, nails dirty, face streaked with dust. He stared at the flames, voice trembling. "They looked like us," he whispered. She didn't answer. "They were us," he said, louder now, as if daring the fire to deny him. Her throat tightened. She thought of her brother, thought of how he might still lie somewhere in this mountain, unnamed, unburied. "We don't choose where we fall," she said finally, "only how we stand before it happens." He looked at her, eyes wide, wet with the kind of fear no rifle could shoot away. "You make it sound like we're already dead," he said. She met his gaze, steady, honest. "No," she whispered, "like we're already remembered." The next morning, the weather turned. Snow began to fall, light at first, then heavier. The air burned their lungs, every breath sharp as glass. Visibility shrank to a blur of white and shadow. Marching became agony, boots slipped, fingers numbed. The men stumbled, muttering curses through clenched jaws. More than once someone dropped to their knees. Each time she reached for them, helped them rise, sometimes with her hands, sometimes only with her eyes. But each time they rose. Not for the commander, not for orders. For her. She felt it in the way their gazes lingered on her back as she walked, in the way they steadied themselves when her voice cut through the snow. And though no one spoke it aloud, the shift was undeniable. She was no longer the girl they'd overlooked. She was the weight that kept them from breaking. By evening they stumbled into a narrow cave. Stone walls shielded them from the storm, though the cold still seeped into their bones. The fire they lit was small, weak. The men huddled close, shoulders pressed together. She sat at the edge, eyes fixed on the cave mouth where the snow still howled. Her body ached, her mind reeled. The commander approached quietly, lowering himself beside her. His face was unreadable in the flickering light. "You kept them moving," he said. She didn't respond. "You kept me moving," he added, softer now. Her chest tightened. She glanced at him, searching for the catch, for the dismissal she'd grown used to, but there was none. Only truth. He leaned closer, voice low. "You may not wear the rank, but don't think they don't see who you are." Her throat burned. She swallowed hard, eyes darting back to the snow. "They don't even know my name," she whispered. The commander studied her for a long moment. "Maybe not," he said finally, "but history will." That night sleep wouldn't come. She lay awake, listening to the storm rage outside, hearing her brother's voice echo in the howl. "Names don't matter, stands do." Her eyes stung. She pressed her hands together, as if holding his memory between her palms. "I won't let them fall," she whispered into the dark. "Not like you." The storm answered, merciless and unrelenting. But inside, she felt a flicker of something stronger than the cold. Not warmth, not yet. But resolve. And for the first time, it was enough to close her eyes and sleep. When dawn came, the storm had passed. The mountains gleamed under a cruel, brilliant sun. The squad stirred, rising stiff and weary. Their eyes found her without words, waiting. And when she stood, rifle slung across her back, and stepped toward the light, they followed. Not because they were ordered. Because she had already begun to lead. The mountain gave no mercy. By the sixth day, every breath cut like glass. Their boots crunched over ice, their shadows stretching thin across the snow. Hunger gnawed, thirst burned, and still, the path climbed higher. The men no longer spoke much. Their voices had shrunk to mutters, to grunts of effort. Silence was easier, safer. Silence didn't waste air. But silence also carried weight. She felt it in the spaces between steps, in the way their gazes flicked toward her whenever the trail steepened, in the quiet expectation that, somehow, she would know what came next. And though no one said it, she knew the truth. The commander was fatting. It started small. He stumbled more often, paused longer at each break. His words, once sharp as steel, grew slower, rasping. His cough lingered after every breath. That night, when the fire sputtered weakly inside another cave, she caught him pressing a hand to his ribs, his jaw clenched tight against pain. Their eyes met. He didn't speak, neither did she. But the truth passed between them anyway. He was running out. The men hadn't noticed yet, or maybe they had and chose to look away. Soldiers were good at that, pretending the cracks weren't there until they split open. She was. Her brother had taught her better. "You don't wait for the breaking point," he'd said once, cleaning his rifle by the light of a single lamp. "You act before the silence becomes permanent." So when the commander faltered again on the march, she moved without thinking, slipped under his arm, steadying him just enough to keep his stride. He stiffened, tried to shake her off, but his breath caught, ragged. "Save it," she whispered, too soft for the others to hear. "They need to believe you're strong." His eyes flicked to hers, anger there but also something else, trust. Slowly he nodded. And for the rest of that climb, they leaned on each other, his strength worn thin, hers drawn from the memory of everyone she refused to lose. By midday, the trail funneled into a narrow pass. Cliffs pressed in on both sides, the sky a sliver of gray above. Every step echoed, every sound felt louder than it should. Something was wrong. She felt it before she saw it. The air carried a tension, the kind that lived in the bones, not the ears. She froze mid-step, raising her fist in warning. The men stopped behind her, confusion flashing in their eyes. And then the shot came. The first round ricocheted off the rock, sparking inches from her head. The second dropped one of the men instantly, his cry cut short. Ambush again. The pass exploded with fire. Enemy figures emerged from the cliffs, rifles flashing. The squad scattered, diving for cover that barely existed. The narrow path left them exposed, trapped. Her pulse pounded. The commander shouted, trying to rally, but his voice broke under the storm of gunfire. She didn't wait for orders. Her rifle snapped to her shoulder. Breath slow, movement steady. One shot, a figure fell. Another. The echoes slammed against the rock walls. But for everyone she hit, another appeared. This wasn't random. It was designed, a kill box. Her warning from days ago, ignored, now lived in brutal clarity. And still, they looked at the commander for direction. Until his knees buckled, dropping him to the ground. The world seemed to pause. The men stared, frozen horror breaking across their faces. And in that silence she knew. It was her moment. "Left ridge," she shouted, her voice cutting sharper than the gunfire. "Suppress it now." The men reacted instinctively, firing toward where she pointed. Her commands came fast, precise. "Second team, shift fire, don't let them cross the rocks. You," she grabbed the young soldier's shoulder, forcing his trembling aim steady. "Breathe on me, fire." He did, and his target dropped. His eyes widened, shock and relief battling in his chest. One by one, the squad began to follow her lead, not because of her rank, not because of protocol. Because she was the only one standing. The only one giving them a chance. She fired again, the recoil slamming her shoulder, the ringing in her ears growing louder. She didn't care. Her focus narrowed to the rhythm, point, command, shoot. And slowly, too slowly, the tide shifted. The enemy fell back, shadows slipping behind stone. The gunfire thinned, then stopped altogether. The pass echoed with silence again. But this silence was different. This one was survival. The men slumped, gasping, eyes wide with exhaustion and disbelief. Their hands trembled as they reloaded, as if afraid the fight would return at any moment. She stood among them, chest heaving, sweat freezing on her skin. And for the first time, every gaze turned to her openly. No shame, no hesitation. Only recognition. The commander, still kneeling, lifted his head. His voice was rough but clear. You kept them alive. Her throat tightened. She wanted to look away, to retreat into the silence that had always protected her. But the men kept staring, waiting, needing. So she met their eyes, one by one. We move, she said, her voice steady, firm. We don't stop until we're clear. And not a single man questioned her. That night they camped deep within a hollow of stone, the fire hidden from sight. The air was thin, biting. Every breath scraped the throat. The commander sat apart, his strength too drained to hide anymore. He gestured for her to join him. When she did, his voice came low. They'll follow you now, he said. She shook her head almost instinctively. They follow you. No, he said firmly. His eyes were tired but sharp. They follow the one who gives them hope. The weight of his words settled heavy in her chest. She wanted to refuse it, to hand it back to him. But deep down she knew. The ridge, the storm, the pass. Piece by piece, her silence had been replaced by something louder. Not words, not recognition, but presence. Later, when the fire died low and the men slept, she sat awake again. Her rifle lay across her knees, her eyes on the stars beyond the narrow crack of sky. She thought of her brother, of the letter she still hadn't read, of the silence she had carried like a shield. Her hands trembled as she reached into her pack, fingers brushing the folded paper. For a long moment she just held it. Then slowly she unfolded it in the dim firelight. Her brother's handwriting stared back at her, the ink smudged but still clear. She read the first line, and her breath broke. If you're reading this, I didn't make it back, but if you're reading this, then you did. Her eyes burned, her chest ached. The words blurred, but she forced herself to keep reading. Don't let them silence you. Don't let them forget you. Stand even when no one calls your name, because one day they will, and when they do, they'll know why. Tears streaked her face before she realized. She pressed the letter to her chest, choking on the weight of it, the truth of it. Her silence had always been her shield, but now it was breaking. And beneath it, something stronger stirred. When dawn came, the squad rose to march again. Their faces were gaunt, their steps heavy, but their eyes found her without hesitation. She folded the letter carefully, tucking it back into her pack. Her brother's voice still echoed in her chest. She rose, adjusted her rifle. And when she stepped forward into the light, they followed. Not because they were told, because they believed. The mountains did not care who led them. On the seventh day, the air grew thinner still. Every step was agony, every heartbeat a battle. The snow no longer fell, but the cold gnawed deeper, sharp enough to feel in the marrow. They moved like shadows now, silent, hunched, hollow-eyed. Hunger had carved them into fragments of men. Sleep never truly came, only brief escapes. But even in that ruin, their eyes still found her. Not with questions anymore, not even with hesitation. With trust. And that trust, heavy as it was, pressed against her chest with every breath. By midday, the path opened onto a plateau. Jagged stones stretched wide, the sky vast above. The view should have been beautiful, it was. Because on the far edge, the enemy waited. Not scattered this time, not hiding. Arrayed. Dozens of them. Dark figures against the pale light, rifles glinting, a wall of intent. The squad froze. No one spoke. Their rifles felt smaller, their breaths louder. This wasn't an ambush. This was a stand. Her stomach tightened. She scanned the line, eyes sharp, searching for weakness, for anything. But the truth was plain. They were outnumbered, outgunned, outlasted. The commander staggered to her side, his face pale. His voice cracked when he spoke. They want to finish it here. She swallowed, the taste of ash in her throat. The men's eyes turned to her again, waiting. And she realized the cruelest truth of all. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about how they would be remembered. The silence broke with a single voice, the young soldier. His words trembled, but they cut through the cold. "What do we do?" The question wasn't meant for the commander. It was meant for her. She closed her eyes only for a moment. She saw her brother's face, heard his laugh, remembered his letter. "Stand even when no one calls your name." Her chest rose steady. She opened her eyes. "We fight," she said, her voice carried low but clear. "Not for ground, not for orders, for each other." The men straightened. Their fear didn't vanish, but it shifted, became something else. Resolve. The first shot cracked, and the plateau erupted. Gunfire screamed. Stone shattered, dust clouded the air. Men dropped to their knees, firing blind, shouting over the chaos. She moved like breath, steady, purposeful. Her rifle barked, each shot deliberate. A shadow fell, another. Her voice cut through the storm. "Shift left, cover the ridge. Suppress the center now." The squad responded without pause, their movements clumsy but alive. Her commands gave them shape. And still the enemy pressed. The plateau became a furnace of fire and fear. Bullets hissed past her ears. The ground shook. One of the men screamed as a round tore through his shoulder. She dragged him back, shoved his rifle into another's hands, and returned to the line. Her lungs burned, her muscles ached, but she did not stop. Because she knew, if she faltered, even for a breath, it would all collapse. The fight stretched into eternity. Seconds bled into minutes, minutes into something unmeasurable. Bodies fell, some enemy, some theirs, each one a stone added to the weight on her chest. At one point, the young soldier stumbled, panic flooding his face as his rifle jammed. She was there in an instant, wrenching the weapon free, clearing the breach, thrusting it back into his hands. "Breathe," she told him, her voice sharp, commanding. "Fight." And he did. Because she believed in him, even when he didn't. But belief could not stop the truth. They were breaking. A grenade rolled across the stone, landing too close. She lunged, shoving two men aside as it detonated. The blast threw her back, tearing fire across her arm. Her ears rang, her vision blurred. Pain seared through her body. But when she staggered to her feet, rifle still clutched in her hands, the men saw it. And they rose too. Not because they had strength left. Because she did. The commander crawled to her side in the chaos. His face was pale, blood at his lips. "You can't hold them," he rasped. "Not like this." She fired another shot, her breath steady despite the ache. "Then we hold until we can't," she said. He stared at her. For a moment, pride flickered in his eyes. "You sound like him," he whispered. Her chest cracked, her throat burned. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Hours passed, though they felt like lifetimes. The enemy line wavered, then pressed again. Back and forth, until the plateau itself seemed to groan under the weight of blood and fire. And then, silence. Not peace, not victory. Only silence. The enemy had pulled back, not gone, waiting, watching. The squad lay scattered across the stone, wounded, exhausted, alive. Barely. She stood among them, her hands trembling, her body broken. Her gaze swept the horizon, knowing this wasn't over. But for now, it was enough. That night, the survivors huddled in the hollow of a cliff. No fire this time, light would betray them. They sat in darkness, breaths shallow, the air thick with exhaustion and grief. One man muttered a prayer. Another wept quietly, head buried in his arms. The young soldier leaned against the wall, his face pale, eyes hollow. "Why keep going?" he whispered into the dark. "Why not stop here?" Her chest ached at the question. She wanted to rest, to stop, to close her eyes and never open them again. But she thought of her brother, of the letter. And she answered. Because stopping is what they want. And standing, her voice cracked but she pushed on, standing is all we have left. The words hung in the darkness, heavier than the silence. And slowly, one by one, the men lifted their heads. Not with hope, not with joy. With defiance. It was enough. Later, when the others slept, she sat awake again. Her arm throbbed, her body screamed, but her eyes stayed on the horizon. Somewhere beyond these mountains lay the world they'd left, the world that had forgotten their names. But not forever. Her brother's voice echoed in her chest. Stand, even when no one calls your name. Her jaw tightened, her grip on the rifle steadied. They might fall tomorrow, but tonight they were still standing. And that meant something. When dawn bled into the mountains, pale and cruel, she rose first. Her body protested, but her resolve did not. She adjusted her rifle, tightened her pack, and stepped into the light. Behind her, one by one, the others followed. Not because they had strength left. Not because they believed in victory. Because they believed in her. And as they marched toward whatever waited, she carried the silence not as a shield, but as a banner. The eighth morning rose thin and gray. Light spilled over the mountains like a whisper, cold and reluctant. The survivors stood on the ridge, faces drawn, bodies broken. Their uniforms hung in tatters, skin bruised, eyes hollow. But still they stood. She counted them silently, too few, always too few. Each face etched into her memory, each weight carried on her shoulders. The silence pressed around them, heavy as the sky. No orders, no maps, no reinforcements, only her. And still their eyes found her. Not the commander, not the flag they no longer had. Her. The nameless, the forgotten, the one who should have never mattered. And in that truth she found fire. The descent from the ridge was brutal. The path twisted through jagged stone, the air growing thinner with each step. Snow crunched under boots, blood marking every trail. She walked at the front, steady, never faltering. Behind her, the men leaned on one another, wounded carrying wounded, all bound together by a thread invisible but unbreakable. By noon, the valley stretched below them, a wide basin of rock and shadow. At its center, the enemy encampment. Smoke curled from fires, shapes moved among tents, too many. The commander, pale and half-conscious, rasped at her side. "You see it," he whispered. She nodded. "I see it." He coughed blood into his hand, his voice little more than air. "They'll follow you, you know that." Her jaw clenched. She hadn't asked for this, she hadn't wanted it. But she knew he was right. And worse, so did they. That night they crouched in the rocks above the valley. The camp below flickered with light, laughter drifting faintly in the air. The young soldier leaned close, voice tight with fear. "We can't fight them all." Her gaze stayed fixed on the camp, her pulse steady. "No," she said, "we can't." He swallowed. "Then what do we do?" Her answer was quiet, certain. "We end it here tonight." The men exchanged glances, some in disbelief, some in resignation. But none argued, because she had never lied to them. The plan was simple, brutal. Strike fast, strike loud, make them believe the squad was larger than it was, spread chaos, break their line long enough for dawn to find them still standing. Not survival. Defiance. The men accepted it in silence, because by now they knew survival was never the point. The attack began with fire. Flames tore through the first row of tents, smoke choking the night. The crack of gunfire shattered the stillness, shouts erupting like thunder. She led the charge, her rifle barking, each step cutting deeper into the enemy's heart. The squad followed, their movements desperate but alive. Grenades burst, shadows fell, screams tore the air. For a moment, chaos reigned. For a moment, it felt like they could win. But the moment shattered fast. The enemy surged, dozens then more, rifles blazing, shadows swarming from the dark. The men faltered, fear clawed at their faces. And then her voice cut through it all. "Forward," she roared. "Stand, don't give them ground." Her words were fire, and they obeyed. The fight became a storm. Bullets whistled, blood painted the dirt, the night glowed with flame. She moved like steel, her body screaming but her will unbroken, every shot precise, every command sharp. The young soldier stumbled at her side, panic flashing in his eyes as an enemy lunged close. She struck first, slamming her rifle butt into the attacker's jaw, dragging the boy back into the fight. "Breathe," she shouted, "fight." And he did, because she believed. But belief could not stop the tide. One by one her men fell, some with cries, some in silence, each death carved deeper into her chest. The commander collapsed, his last breath spent whispering, "Lead them." And she did, even as her legs shook, even as her lungs burned, even as the night closed in. The enemy pressed harder. The squad was a shadow of itself now, wounded, bloody, barely holding. And still they stood, because she did, until the final moment came. A grenade landed among them, its metal shell gleaming in the firelight. She saw it, saw the faces around her, men too weak to move, too slow to save themselves. And she knew. There was no choice. Her brother's voice echoed in her chest. "Stand, even when no one calls your name." She moved without hesitation, diving, grabbing, clutching the grenade to her chest. Her body curled around it, the last shield she could give. And then, light, sound, silence. The blast tore the air apart. Dust and fire swallowed the night. When it cleared, she was gone. Only silence remained. But it was not the silence of defeat, because the men still stood. Her sacrifice had bought them seconds, seconds that became minutes, minutes that stretched into dawn. And when the first light touched the valley, the survivors raised their rifles, not in victory but in defiance. Because she had taught them how. Days later, when word of the stand reached beyond the mountains, no one remembered her name. The reports spoke of the squad, of their courage, of their impossible defiance. Her name was lost, but not her echo. The men carried it with them, in every breath, in every scar. Her brother's words lived in them now, etched into their bones. "Stand, even when no one calls your name." And so she was gone, but not forgotten, because in the silence of men, her resolve outlasted. And that silence, broken by defiance, became her legacy.